Well, my theory and Pat's theory was this book, The Nonviolent Life. How do you talk about nonviolence? What does it mean? And we're all struggling with this, and we're all involved in various things, and we all got our day-to-day. And so, and even thinking about that over the years, I've come up with this approach that active, creative, loving, universal nonviolence requires 3 simultaneous attributes. Really nonviolent to yourself. Second, really nonviolent toward all human beings, all creatures, and Mother Earth. And third, at the same time, you can't wait to be perfect. You have to be part of the global grassroots movement of nonviolence. You have to get involved in public action for justice and peace. That's what I want to talk about this afternoon. Buckle your seatbelts. You're all a part of justice and peace groups. You all know this. But I just want to go through some of these basics for the record and look at some things that we can do and we are doing. And then, if you can stand it, I know not everybody's a Christian, but I wanted to look at a little section of the gospel, how Jesus organizes this movement. And then, Pat, what I've been thinking, it's like 10 of 2, I don't know if I talk for a bit. We could just move right then and there into small groups for like 20 minutes, and then we'll take a break. Whatever, okay. Whatever? And then we'll come back for having a question. Okay, and then so I'll talk, we're going to do small groups, then we'll take a break. That's my plan. Is that theoretically? And then we'll have large group question and comments and discussion, and then I might have a few concluding points, depending. And again, all of this is in this book, much more thought out than I could ever try to say today, so I hope you get this. Thank you. But my theory, having, like you, been working on this, feels like my whole life, is that the only way change happens in history is bottom-up, people power, grassroots movements of nonviolence. It's the only way positive social change ever happened, period, from Jesus to Martin Luther King and today. Period. So I'm not talking to you like somebody like me or what I might have done normally, like if we're a Christian group, about being part of the church. I'm not saying that today. I'm saying we have to be part of the global grassroots movement for justice and peace. I'm presuming and hoping all of you are doing that. And if you are, thank you, thank you, thank you. Continue on with as much love and nonviolence and joy as you can muster. Whatever you're doing, you got to double it. But if Joan Baez were here, did you hear her say last week, double it, triple it, quadruple it, as we're heading toward non-existence. Every person is needed in this global grassroots movement of nonviolence. But what you're not hearing is that more is happening now positively in the world than ever before in history. Over 2/3 of the human race are personally involved in bottom-up grassroots movement of nonviolence. And there's more coming out about nonviolence than ever before. It's actually quite exciting. There have been like 85 nonviolent revolutions in the last 40 years alone. If you're not involved, I urge you to pick a cause, a struggle, and get involved. And to realize what I'm realizing as I get older, that everything is connected, that we all have to connect the dots. If you care about the environment, you're against racism and sexism and poverty and greed and nuclear weapons and war. I'm just saying. And they're all connected. They're all connected. But you can kind of step into the struggle or the global movement and you're connected to everything. But we want to be really conscious as things get worse. We're going to go deeper and get wider and expanding our action. Is this okay to talk like this? You're looking at me, oh my God, he's going at it again. But I was with Cesar Chavez shortly before he died, and I've said this at every talk I've ever given in my life, because I said to him, if I'm ever with people and they say, what do we do? What should I say? And he said, tell everybody for the rest of your life, and he started hitting his hand, public action, public action, public action. Everybody has to engage in some public action for justice, peace, and environment. Are there any questions? So in the book, here's a quote from Cesar Chavez, the great leader of the farm workers, whom I loved. We can change the world if we do it nonviolently. What he's meaning, if you do things violently, there's no difference. You're just the same as that's the problem. But if we are actually engaging this power and methodology, we can change the world. Quote, if we can just show people how they can organize nonviolently, we can't fail. Nonviolence has never failed when it's been tried. Nonviolence has never failed when it's been tried. Now you're going, oh, come on. So at that conference I organized on nonviolence, we called it the first national conference on nonviolence in U.S. history. I'm a little bombastic, but 3 years ago in Santa Fe, we filmed the whole thing. You can look at it on YouTube. Jim Lawson gave the opening keynote, and the next morning we had Dr. Erica Chenoweth. Have you all heard of her? Yes. Jim gets up and says, forget Martin Luther King. Erica is more important than Martin Luther King. This was an incredible thing to say. Because Erica has proven to the world that Gandhi was right, that this methodology works. We've never had this before. It only came out in the last 10 years. And I go on at length about her book, Erica Chenoweth, Why Civil Resistance Works, The Strategic Logic of Nonviolent Conflict. She, by the way, gave this hour-and-a-half lecture that had us on the edge of our seats. It was the greatest talk I've ever heard in my life. So she's the Foreign Affairs, which is a pretty right-wing magazine, has called her one of the top 10 intellectuals on the planet. Jim says she's more like Galileo. But she is this social scientist. She's not like me. She's just all brains, and she's got massive staff and people. She hires social science for 10 years, and they study every war and revolution and anything violent from 1900 to 2006. This is just math and statistics. If you want to read the book, I read it. It's like reading the phone book. I didn't. It's all charts. And she proves through math and statistics that where nonviolence was tried, everywhere on the planet from 1900 to 2006, it worked. It's incredible. And the thing is that the governments of the world and the UN are studying her. But the rest of us aren't. I mean, I could try to explain this to you, but I don't know how. I mean, it's so incredible. The evidence is in. And she has all these documentations and case studies about, the percentages of that leads not only to a nonviolent resolution of conflict, but actually creates nonviolent democratic societies. This is really good news, folks, and confirms what some of us in this room have known all our lives. And it's very, very, very hopeful. And I write about her a lot and what I learned from her book. We're talking about Mahatma Gandhi's nonviolent revolution to get the British to leave peacefully. Martin Luther King's civil rights movement getting the fall of segregation peacefully in Birmingham. We could talk about the people power movement in the Philippines, or the nonviolent movement to end apartheid. It really came down through nonviolence. We could talk about all the nonviolent revolutions, especially the fall of the Berlin Wall and the Soviet Union communism, that led to so much nonviolent transformation that could have led to millions of people could have died. And on, so much is happening. My hero, I think the world's greatest person, this is a silly thing to say, but you know what I mean, is Lima Gaboe. Do you all know her? You have to learn about her. I write a lot about her. She won the Nobel Peace Prize a few years ago. There's this horrible, evil dictator in Liberia, Charles Taylor, who's killed 200,000 people. Lima has a dream of Jesus. I always imagine Jesus in these scenarios smoking a cigarette. Lima, I need you to get busy. And she wakes up and goes, okay. She calls all the women of Liberia to put on white clothes, walk into the streets, and sit down, and that we're just not playing with this anymore. And gosh, they did. Her theory is, we're going to get killed anyway, so we might as well go out with a bang. And it became contagious. And Taylor on the news started mocking her, these stupid women. And he was gone in 2 weeks. And he's in prison now. And they had the first woman ever elected president of in Africa. Mrs. Shia, I forget her last name. Anyway, amazing, powerful, active movement, organized nonviolence that works when you pit your entire soul and life. You give everything for justice and peace. That's what's required. You know, I love too the quote from Archbishop Romero. At the Mass, as he's about to be assassinated, one of the things he said was, nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. Now that's very helpful. These great people just put it so simply. Everybody can do something. Every one of us is needed. Don't believe the culture. Every one of us can make a difference. Every one of us has to be involved. Every one of us can be Rosa Parks, that tipping point person, you know? And that's how this all happens. And, you know, we should just take a moment and give thanks for, after the horrible massacre, the Parkland, Florida students who just start speaking out, taking to the streets, going to the state capitol. And I don't know if President Jim is still here today. He was just telling me on Wednesday here at St. Joseph, they had 100 kids standing out in the snow. I think the president was with them. Great. But did you know what happened Wednesday? Over 1 million high school kids and some college kids out of 3,000 schools walked out. Did you all know that? Isn't that wonderful? This is hopeful. And this is how it happens. It can become contagious and we can get somewhere. I read some very devastating article online about, you know, that poor dog that died on the United Airlines. Did you see that article? But I mean, you know, and that's horrible, and I love dogs too. And the next day, the Republicans had legislation to protect dogs on airlines. But 7,000 kids have been shot since Sandy Hook. Shot and killed since Sandy Hook. 7,000 kids have been shot and killed since Sandy Hook, and there's no legislation. It's not going to happen. All of this is so insane, like the insanity of violence that he could say, let's arm the teachers to protect. But you know, it's money. This is all about money, because if the country made this happen, that's 1 million more guns would be sold. And it's all money. Everything's about money. But it's all movements, grassroots movements of nonviolence. So my questions for you are, you know, how have you been involved in the grassroots movements? How are you making the connections today? What are you doing now, working for justice for the poor, or the abolition of war, the end of war, or for the environment? How are you connecting the dots? What can we do? An afternoon like today is a precious time to just step back and look at your own life. And I'm not telling you what to do particular, I'm saying you just got to do something. It was Dan who said, you know, the old 60s thing, you know, don't just stand there, do something. And Dan reversed that and said, don't just do something, stand there. You know, we have to do like all of that from now on. But if I just go on. So it's all being part of the grassroots movement and making the connections. And I'm just trying to encourage you to do that and to redouble it as best we can in light of all of these things. I was thinking, you know, what could I share with you about my own experience when I put that question to myself? What have I been doing, and what am I doing, and how am I going to be involved in the movement? You know, I've been involved in probably organized thousands of demonstrations, like a daily thing for me, as you do. But I mean, I'm just a little over the top because I have this coffee problem, as we've heard. And I've always been interested in all the issues. I don't necessarily recommend that. But for example, I remember I was 25 and I was in graduate school in philosophy at Fordham in New York. And the Jesuits have a long time history with the CIA and the FBI. Most of the recruiting comes from Jesuit schools. This went back to Hoover. And the CIA, the head of the CIA, Casey, who was running the Contra War in Nicaragua, came to speak, and the Jesuits were delighted. And he gave a great big speech, "We need to kill the Sandinistas." Appalling. And so we were organizing on campus, our little group, as you do, and I was agitating with the young people. And we found out that the next day, the CIA recruiter was coming to campus. What do? You have to do something. So we had about 50 students, and some of us as younger Jesuits and students were going to sit in and block the entrance to this dean's office where the interviews were. They had a whole list of kids who were going to have the interviews and all be hired to work on the CIA. Well, then the Jesuits told us we would be kicked out of the society that afternoon if we did it. We didn't do it, but 9 kids did. And here comes the CIA recruiter. We hadn't got that far. We were just planning. We had our signs. We were nonviolent, and we sat in. We blocked the whole building, signs everywhere. And here comes the poor guy, and he walks up to us, and here's the dean, and he goes, "Well, the CIA will never come back to Fordham," and turned and walked away. Yes. It works, Tracy. This stuff works if you do it. That was an important thing in my life because I saw how it could work. And what the Parkland kids are trying to do is take it to the whole country. So at Los Alamos, when I moved to New Mexico, we started this campaign there through Pax Christi, as some of you know. Los Alamos is a big mountain in the center of New Mexico where Oppenheimer came in and stole the land from the indigenous people and literally built the atomic bomb factory and dumped the radioactive waste down onto the indigenous. And I write at length in my book about my friends at the Santa Clara Pueblo who've been fighting war, racism, poverty, environmental destruction their whole lives. And they're like the embodiment of nonviolence for me. What do? So we have to do something. So we went up there in 2002 and held signs. And I was on the front page of the state newspaper, and I was getting death threats because they had only had 2 demonstrations in history since 1940 against the nuclear weapons industry. All the churches were bought off. I'm talking about New Mexico. It's the poorest state in the country, number 1 in military spending, number 1 in nuclear weapons, number 1 in drunk driving, child hunger, suicide, domestic violence, and on and on. But there are more millionaires per capita and PhDs per capita at Los Alamos than any other place on the planet. The Pueblo down below it is the 2nd poorest county in the country, where kids are starving. So this wasn't working, but Gandhi says you need a symbol. So we spent a year, I don't know if you all know this, Mary Ellen knows this, in our Pax Christi group, we're thinking, we're looking in the Bible. I know it's a little over the top, but we got to that story of Jonah. Remember the guy with the whale? Because he wouldn't do what God said. So then he walks through Nineveh and calls everybody to repent of the sin of violence. And gosh, they did. It's the only successful story in the whole Bible. I'm just saying. The whole town, from the king to the cattle, put on sackcloth and ashes, practiced nonviolence, and lived happily ever after. What's so funny is Jonah was quite pissed off about all this, and he's mad at God. He's an activist with issues, but we better not talk about that. He didn't work on his inner, okay. So we formed the Sackcloth and Ashes Subcommittee. I know, it took us a year. 500 sackcloth, small, medium, and large. Hundreds of bags of ashes. And on August 6th, I think it was the 60th anniversary, 2005, of Hiroshima, in the park where the atomic bomb was physically built, we blessed them, 400 people. We marched, we processed in silence through the whole town, taking over the whole town, with all the media there, and we had it synchronized in Gandhian Satyagraha, like a military campaign, right on the mark. It was like 2:45. Everybody put on their sackcloth, covering head to toe, poured ashes all over the ground, sat down in strict silence for 30 minutes to repent of the mortal sin of war and nuclear weapons and beg the God of peace for the gift of nuclear disarmament. What do you think of that? A little over the top. It was great, and after 30 minutes, everybody came back to the park, and every single person was crying. That first time we did it, it was so powerful. I'm just talking about public action, public action, public action. We were trying to go there without yelling. We were trying to go there without calling anybody names, which you could be tempted to do. But we actually have to love these people because they're the only ones who know how to get rid of the darn things. I'm just saying, love your enemies is actually, they're our salvation. I mean, we can't judge them. There's no more us and them. We're all in the same boat here. And I think they got the message because, there was so much coverage. And anyway, we've been doing it ever since. We'll be back on August 6th this year. You're cordially invited to come. We're going to have a really big event for August 6th, 2020. We're already planning it, the 75th anniversary of Hiroshima. And I just rented out the big, massive hotel in Albuquerque. I'm going to have a who's who of speakers from Richard Rohr and Erica Chenoweth to, I hope, Amy Goodman and many other great people. In my new book, too, I talk about going to Standing Rock. Have any of you been to did you get to go to Standing Rock? It was incredible. And of all the things I've been part of my life, it was a Tuesday night. I was in Phoenix, Arizona, and I was actually, forgive me, but with Joan Baez, and the call came that night. We call all clergy in the United States to drop everything and be in Standing Rock by tomorrow night. It was like a movie set. This massive Missouri River, 3 miles wide, where they're building this evil pipeline for $1 billion, which is going to leak and poison the water for 10 million people. But the Standing Rock, it's their land and their water. And there were thousands of this campsite on the property in these strange brown hills and fires and the camps, and then sprinkled throughout these 3-story tall white teepees. It was so moving. And then you come to the camp. We are nonviolent. We are unarmed. We are protectors, not protesters. We are prayers, not protesters. We respect everybody and everything, beginning with the land and the water, because water is life, things like that. And there were thousands of people there. Everybody had been trained for 3 hours a day in nonviolence. I actually went in and sat in the back of one of these tents. And the people who were flown in were from Harvard. I was impressed. And the thing was, you were being trained to be shot and killed. And so we had a march with 600 clergy, mainly women, nearly all Episcopalian, with thousands of others of the Standing Rock people, right up for about a mile through the hills to the front lines of the tanks and the police, and there's the pipeline on the other side. And it was like Selma or something, the spirit and the danger. The day before, they were all shot at with rubber bullets, and the day after we were there, they were shot at. And they asked me to speak to the crowd, and I talked about this beatitude and saying, you are teaching the whole world, the holy people of Standing Rock, to practice nonviolence, to take another step forward, because we're one with the earth. And it was such a great experience. And they have unleashed a new spirit in all of the indigenous peoples around the world. And it started because of the kids. I don't know if you really know how. It's just a group of the kids decided to bicycle to D.C. for a protest, and one thing led to another. You don't know how the contagion is going to start. Joan Baez keeps telling me everything I say to you about nonviolence is wrong. Isn't that funny? Isn't that fantastic? She says, you can't organize it, John. I'm going, you got to organize it. No, nonviolence is organic. She just said this on NPR last week. This is her line. But you could argue she's been involved in more movements than any other living person on the planet right now. I think it's both, because Martin and Gandhi are organizing. We have to become not just activists, but organizers and building movements. But you don't know how it's going to become contagious, organic. Like, who could have predicted the Occupy movement would take off as it did? That's what Joan means. And really, you can't predict the civil rights movement. But Jim Lawson disagrees and says, nope, this is just science. If you plan it and organize it, you can get in there and transform the whole culture. So I'm just offering all these lovely thoughts and images to you. I've been really involved in the death penalty the campaign to abolish the death penalty all my life as well. And last year during the inauguration, there was just demonstrations going on everywhere. It was like a potpourri of demonstration. So a bunch of us went to the Supreme Court on the 40th anniversary, which is at the same time as the inauguration of the modern death penalty movement. Maybe you saw it on Facebook. We had a banner the size of this wall that said, "Stop executions." And we had roses. We were just so nice. We were all church people, and a lot of the leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement, and a couple of people who had had a parent or a brother or sister killed, who are publicly against the death penalty through Murder Victims' Families for Reconciliation, and our friend who had been 21 years on death row before the judge announced he was completely and totally innocent and was released. As about 150 people have now been released, proven that they were innocent. It's incredible, so insane. Well, gosh, they arrested us and pushed us around and put us in chains and held us in chains, chained to the wall together, very roughly, all day till midnight, and hurt a couple of the people. Some went to the hospital, some had panic attacks, we weren't fed, and then they threw us into the DC Central Jail block, a place I know well, which is a little tiny cell. It hasn't been cleaned since 1843. The cell was covered with cockroaches. And I used to, my friends and I, wherever John went, back in the day, we used to memorize Martin Luther King's speeches. Yeah, and his famous speech in Detroit, Martin is going, "Nobody wants to go to jail, but if they put you in jail, you enter that dungeon of despair and darkness and transform it into a haven of harmony and hope." And I'm going, "I don't think so, Martin." And, we're talking about nonviolence, but the cockroaches, there's a metal thing here, and the light was this high here, and I'm on the thing. And the cockroaches, and I'm going, Gandhi didn't say anything about being nonviolent to the cockroaches, but actually he did. He had mice crawling in his room and slept with the mice. You don't kill the cockroaches. And we spread the word that if you don't touch the cockroaches, they don't touch you. They just have to learn to live in peace. I'm just saying. I don't know what it all means. We had a terrible 48 hours. And, I was in and out of community service until just recently. All last year, my job was cleaning the kitchen and bathrooms at this homeless shelter in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And we're ready to go back for seconds, is what I'm saying. So in your program, do you have the brochure? No, I got one here. Pat, do you have the Campaign Nonviolence brochure? Oh, here, I got one. So in your packet, everybody got one of this. Is my commercial announcement. You're all involved in stuff. I hope and pray. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The group I work with is called Campaign Nonviolence, and I really want you to read this. This is just in terms of what can we do, especially as we go forward. Well, what happened was Ken Buddigan and I, and old friends, longtime organizers and activists at Pache Bene, 5 years ago, really 6 years ago, under Obama, we were disappointed the movement wasn't moving. So we said, being quite silly, as you see, let's just call upon the whole country to take to the streets and just march against everything. And we picked International Peace Day, September 21st, which is a good time, September. And we called for a national week of action, Campaign Nonviolence, during that week. This September will be our 5th year. And there's going to be over 2,000 actions, protests, demonstrations, and marches across the country in all 50 states against war, racism, nuclear weapons, poverty, corporate greed, environmental destruction, the whole darn culture of violence, and for Dr. King's vision of the coming of a new culture of peace, justice, and nonviolence. What do you think of that? Yeah, it's really cool. So I know some of you maybe, right, have been a part of this? Yeah. But have you ever heard of a place called Little Rock, Arkansas? They had last September 36 events during their week of action. And it's changing Arkansas. This is an organizing strategy that I picked up from Germany. In 1970, a couple of activists in Germany said, well, let's have a national week of action. And they get the churches involved because there was a peace movement in Germany, as you may remember. This year there'll be, whatever I don't know the math, 60th year in the first week of November, with about 60,000 events. Every single church and religious community and school does an event. That's why they're very ahead on a lot of issues, including immigration, fighting the Nazism history, and they're about to go completely solar because it's normal now. I'm talking about an organizing strategy. What can we do? We've hired this big PR firm, and they spent a fortune on it. I can't get any national press coverage on this, but people around the country are responding, and I think it's because you don't feel so alone. And we're trying to, as Ken has been saying, we need to connect the dots. You know, we really need to say, this is all one culture of violence, and we want a whole new world of nonviolence, and this is doable. But if we continue to build, we don't know where this is going, but it will take off. And actions like the kids in Parkland are all part of it. And we're going to be sowing seeds. Well, I called, when we started this, we just got on the phone. I don't know if I called you, Mary Ellen, or somebody in Maine. I'm sure I did. I called Wilmington, Delaware. They have a part-time peace person, one in the whole state. He yelled at me. This was 5 years ago. Why are you bothering me? We haven't had a march for peace here since the Vietnam War. Last year, Wilmington had 62 events in their week of action. It's transforming the whole state of Delaware. They did this interfaith thing, mainly Muslim, that 500 people attended about Muslim, Jewish, Christian nonviolence. And they're moving. I'm just saying, Maine, you live in this very great place, lucky you, and you have such a great history. You have so much more power than you realize. You can be a beacon to the rest of the country. The other thing that you might see in the brochure, if you're hanging in here with me, is we've also called for this project called the Nonviolent Cities Project. I'm just sharing with you what I'm working on as an organizer and activist. I was speaking at a place called Carbondale, Illinois, and they had a little dinner for me, and I said, what do you all do? And they said, we're working for Nonviolent Carbondale. And I said, excuse me? And they told me the story that they've been meeting for years, the old guard of the movement, and they said, this isn't working because we're all in separate camps. The city's getting worse with gun violence and racism and poverty. And if Martin Luther King were here, he wouldn't buy any of this. And we would say to Martin, well, what do you want us to do? What is the future of our city, Carbondale, Illinois? And Martin, they said, would say, it's got to become a nonviolent city. And they went, that's a good idea. So they started this idea. They lifted up a vision of their city becoming a city of nonviolence. So they went to the city council, and they went to every meeting since, and with the mayor, and got them start reimagining what they could become in 50 years from now. And then they went to the police department over years, and the school system, and the healthcare system, and the most violent, poorest streets in the city. And they're on a path. So Ken and I have pitched to the whole country. We have 50 cities, 15 of them quite seriously working on a nonviolent city. I was just in Cincinnati, and 400 people came out for the launch of Nonviolent Cincinnati with the city council. It's really wonderful. Yesterday, they're in St. Paul, Minneapolis, with the mayors and the archbishop. Because of the archbishop, because of us, and because of our work with Pope Francis, it all seems are about a year away from launching nonviolent Twin Cities. And they've announced yesterday that they're going to have 10 days of action, every day, morning, noon, and night, nonviolence trainings and stuff in St. Paul, Minneapolis. This is really wonderful. I'm giving you this idea too. What would nonviolent Portland look like? Nonviolent Bangor. Is there a city called Bath? Yeah. I'm just saying. Nonviolent Maine. I know about Bath Iron Works. I've held my signs out there. My friends hammered on there, you may remember, in 1995. It's a great tool, an organizing tool. Anyway, I get carried away, and I know it's almost 6 o'clock at night. Well, Yes, I just want to go on a little bit more.
Bangor is your middle picture on the brochure with the young people carrying.
In the middle of the picture, Bangor, Maine, Campaign Nonviolence. There you go. Thanks for telling me, Mary Ellen. Now you just need to get 49 more. No, I'm only kidding. Thank you so much. That's great. So there's other things I'd love to say, and I also want to talk a little bit about this passage of organizing from Jesus. Can you stand a few more minutes and then we'll take a small group? Now, if this isn't your cup of tea, just think I'm talking about, say, Gandhi organizing the Salt March. But I wanted to read this passage, since we're here at St. Joseph's, which has been really important to me, from Luke 10, where he sends 72 people ahead of him. It's movement building to announce peace and the reign of God, and they all come back happy. Now, that's what we're talking about doing here. And in Campaign Nonviolence, what you are now calling for is the abolition of war, poverty, racism, nuclear weapons, environmental destruction, the whole culture of violence. It's all got to go. And the institutionalization throughout civic society in Maine and the world for a new culture of nonviolence. I figure, Tracy, why not just go over the top and say all this stuff? Because we don't know. Nobody else is saying it, but you and I can say it, and you can say it here in Maine. Well, that's what I think Jesus did. If you can stand me, I want to read this a little bit. So this is from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10. Okay. Jesus appointed 72 others whom he sent ahead of him in pairs to every town and place he intended to visit. He said to them, "The harvest is abundant, but the laborers are few, so ask the master of the harvest to send out laborers for his harvest. Go on your way. I am sending you like lambs into the midst of wolves." Thank you. "Carry no money bag, no sack, no sandals. Greet no one along the way. Into whatever house you enter, first say, 'Peace to this house.' If a peaceful person lives there, your peace will rest with her. But if not, it will return to you. Stay in the house, eat and drink what is offered to you, for the laborer deserves her payment. Do not move about from one house to another. Whatever town you enter and they welcome you, eat what is set before you, cure the sick, heal everybody, and say to them, 'The reign of God is at hand for you.' Whatever town you enter and they do not receive you, go into the streets and say, 'The dust of this town that clings to our feet, we shake off against you. But know that the reign of God is at hand for you.' The 72 returned rejoicing and said, 'Lord, even the demons are subject to us because of your name.' Jesus said, 'I observed Satan fall like lightning from the sky. Behold, I have given you power to tread upon serpents and scorpions and upon the full force of the enemy, and nothing will ever harm you. Nevertheless, do not rejoice because the spirits of violence are subject to you, but rejoice because your names are written in heaven.' At that very moment, he rejoiced in the Holy Spirit and said, 'I give you praise, God of heaven and earth, for although you have hidden these things from the wise and the learned, you have revealed them to the childlike. Yes, such has been your gracious will.'" I find this so helpful. I don't know about you, but what I've been trying all day to say in my poor fashion is, we're going to be really nonviolent to ourselves. We're going to be really nonviolent toward every human being on earth. We can do it. It's exciting. And the creatures, and Mother Earth, and we're getting moving in a movement of active nonviolence to disarm and transform the world. Well, that's what this guy does. He sends them up ahead and he says, "Go on your way." I mean, how much more do we need to hear? Get moving. It's an imperative. Get out there. You know? Stand up, speak out, take public action. Cesar Chavez was quite annoyed with me that night and was saying, you got to tell people that nonviolence only happens in the streets. I could quote Gandhi to you, which you would not like, and I'm going to say it anyway now that I think about it. Nonviolence, oh, I probably shouldn't say this. Don't listen, Pat. Nonviolence doesn't happen at a conference or from the pulpit or from the classroom. It only happens in the prison cells, in the dock, when you're in court, and on the gallows. Thank you, Gandhi. You see what he's saying? It's risk and involvement. Go on your way. I am sending you like lambs into the midst of wolves. That's us. Now just take a moment and ponder that image. You got a little tiny lamb here. Let's put about 30 wolves in a circle around the lamb. And what are the wolves thinking about the lamb? Dinner time. And that's Jesus' image for us in the culture of violence. But you and I might be lambs. I mean, this image runs throughout the Gospels. I find it very provocative, The sheep, the shepherd, the hirelings, the fox. He calls Herod to go tell that fox. But really we're called to be lambs like him. But he's just using imagery about nonviolence. But you and I want to be wolves, or we're part wolf. And I'm just saying, let's work on our inner lamb. This isn't working for you here. I know you're going, this imagery is not. We're going, John, cool it with the lamb and the sheep language. But you see what I mean. You don't want to be wolves in this culture for peace. So maybe you need to befriend your inner wolf. Can I go that way? That's not working. You're going to disarm your wolf to reclaim your lamb nature. No, I don't think that's working. Anyway, I'm sending you like lambs among wolves. If you don't like that, you're going to be nonviolent people in the culture of violence, okay? That's the point. And then this whole mission, it's like the exile, urgent, no money. This is the urgent thing. Friends, to be serious, we don't want to wait for a massacre to happen in Portland, Oregon. Can we be as passionate as the Parkland kids without having a massacre? You see my point? Does that make sense? And that's what we need. That's the urgency that Jesus is talking about in Gandhi and Dorothy and Dr. King. It's drop everything and give your lives for justice and peace and for Mother Earth. And all that business of when you go to the house, stay in the house and eat. And whatever you do, don't go outside the house, but stay in the house and just talk with the people in the house. It's an underground movement. This is like marching through current day Syria or Rwanda or apartheid South Africa. It's very dangerous. I know something about that too. And doing dangerous activity, really nonviolently. It's mindful, centered. You're trying to help people. And everywhere the message is, be really peaceful. Peace be with you. And you're peaceful. And your peace comes back on me. And I'm peaceful. And we're all peaceful. And I will cure the sick. And that's language about healing people who've been destroyed by the culture of violence. Help people to become nonviolent, and the healing will begin. Do you see? Isn't that lovely? That's all it is. It's expelling the demons. That means being possessed by America. We're going to make America great again. That's a demonic spirit. That's just language about the empire. And Satan, that big word, which you all freak out, is code word for the Roman Empire. The writer can't say that because he'll have his head chopped off that day, which probably happened to him. But you could say Satan. Everybody hearing this in the first century knew what he's talking about. I saw the empire fall like lightning from the sky. When you do this, when you organize a movement of nonviolence, the empire is already fallen. If you have the vision. When Rosa Parks refused to stand up, segregation fell. If you have the vision of the nonviolence, Jesus, it already happened. Do you see? It's wonderful. That's the way we're going to think and act and be. I love all of that.